Hi, welcome to this episode of The Latest Thread. We're really happy to be here. And today we're going to have a little What Would You Do episode. These are things that may or may not have ever happened on a quilt that was in front of us. But we're just going to have a little chat about what we would do if these situations happened. So I have a list of 8, and we're just going to pick a random number, and then I'll ask that question, and we'll all chat about it. So, okay, Jeannie, pick a number 1 through 8.
2.
2. The client has a patterned backing fabric. There is no top designated. You evaluate it and load what you think is the top of the design, and you quilt it, and you're wrong. What do you do? What would you do?
I quilted the whole quilt,
Hmm?
not just like one pass.
No, it was the whole quilt, and like you thought that was the top of the design, and she thought that was the bottom of the design.
Mm. Well, I'm gonna hope that since it's at the back and hopefully it's not, you know, since she didn't actually mark the top and the bottom and wasn't specific that this piece had to be at the top, I'm gonna hope that she will be understanding and I will just have a discussion with her and say I'm sorry and maybe offer a little bit of a discount because I messed that up a little bit. But she didn't actually give you that information.
Yeah.
What was the top and what was the bottom. So
you didn't really mess it up.
So you didn't really mess it. Yeah, I didn't really mess it up.
Yeah. Um. Anybody else want to add? Same thing.
I would not offer discount.
Yeah.
I'm not that nice because, if she had, because like Jeannie said, she didn't do anything wrong in her mind. And if it needs to be that specified, she should have marked it with a pin or made clear which would be the top and the bottom.
Yeah.
Because some of them, I literally sit there and second guess myself, whether it's the top or the bottom, but yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, this did happen, and it was many years ago, like before snap a picture and text was normal. Now I'd be like, this is the top of the back, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, I would do a discount too. Start small. But if it became a thing, I would give them the quilt for free to not rip. Anything to not rip.
Yeah, but I don't know. They didn't designate what was the top. And if it's like, it wasn't directional, it was just the way each one of us saw that print, Paula, you want to add anything?
I think I would probably very nicely mention that since it wasn't designated top or bottom, I made my best choice. And if they're still upset, I'd probably offer a small discount, but I wouldn't rip it.
We're the meanies, Ava. I won't give a discount.
No,
just to make life easier.
I guess it depends
on the client
how much I've known the customer.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, Ava, give me a number.
I'm gonna go with 3.
3. Your machine was left over the quilt top and it drips oil onto the quilt top. What would you do?
Well, I would, because on the tour we were selling this beautiful spray, and don't ask me what it's called right now.
Lifter.
Spot lifter, thank you. It escaped me. But that actually, I have used that and that works really well. But I generally make a habit of parking my machine away from the quilt if I don't finish it because, it's a machine. There's always at least one drip of oil, so I don't want to take the chance. But spot lifter works great.
I've used just powder, baby powder, any kind of powder.
Yeah. Baking soda, cornstarch.
Mm-hmm.
When you don't have spot lifter, because spot lifter is amazing, but when you don't have it, we need to get the oil out now.
I need to get some because I will often have a drip of oil in the middle of my frame somewhere when I first run the machine, and then I drape something over it and it picks it up from the back. So I've done Dawn, but I think the spot lifter would be much handier.
Yeah. All right, Paula, pick a number, not 2 or 3.
Okay, 5.
5. Oh, you're halfway through quilting the top and notice that now on the second half, there are many open seams. What would you
Oh,
do?
guessing swearing is not one of the
That's
options.
always first. Okay.
I actually have had this.
Mhm,
Um, and if it's one or two, well, many open seams, I usually call them and say, okay, here's what we've got. I can fix them. If there's multiple seams, I will charge them for it.
mhm,
I have come across a quilt that's one or two. I fix them, don't say anything. Um, Repeat offenders, I have a small discussion with them, and I've had to do that. Talk about, well, this is what happens. And I usually take pictures so they can see
mhm.
when it's laid out on a frame and tension, those things pop right open.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but I will fix on the frame.
I
Uh,
usually just pin them closed so I can still quilt just like
mhm.
I would if it was sewn. And then when I'm done with that spot, I put a piece of painter's tape on there and they get it back to whip stitch it
Yeah.
closed because I'm not. Mm-mm.
I usually fix one or
Bad
two,
idea.
and then the
Yeah.
same thing. After that, I'm like, hey, now this is repetitive. Okay, you are trying to get this finished fast, or you just weren't paying attention. And then I'll do the same thing. I'll start marking them with painter's tape. They can fix it later. Ava.
Yeah,
My
and I agree with
mother-in-law
that.
is, oh, sorry.
That's okay.
My mother-in-law is a great example. She's 90 years old, and a quarter-inch seam is just a suggestion, literally. And, but she enjoys still making quilt tops here or there, and there's always open seams,
Mhm,
always. So I will, and she's special in regards that she knows that her quilting is not what she wants it to be, and she's okay with that. So I will literally, as I get to them, turn it under and top stitch
mhm,
because hers are generally, scrappy quilts and they get an edge to edge. So I'll just top stitch it so she doesn't have to do anything. And with the client, often it's just one, maybe. And I'll do what Jody suggested, just secure it, quilt over it, and then mark it so they can finish it whichever way they like.
And I agree with all of those things. I have only ever had one or two on a top. I haven't had a whole half of the top that had a bunch of them. So one or two I'll fix.
mhm. Sometimes you wonder, did I start at the wrong side? Like maybe they were really bad and it got better. Yeah.
The worst is when you find out they're there because you sewed in and got stuck in it.
Or
Yeah.
when you're trying to fix it and there isn't enough to overlap.
Oh yeah.
That's the
Stretch it
worst when
over.
there's not.
I had that once, and the seam underneath, I think it was caught with maybe a thread or two.
Oh
So when I
wow.
opened, when I saw it open, there wasn't anything. So I had to pull back more on the seam so I could, fudge it.
Yeah. All right, Jody, pick a number.
8.
8. You loaded the backing the wrong way and realized on the last pass it's 3 inches too short. What would you do?
I only did that one time. And luckily, she had extra on the side, so I just took it off, trimmed it off the
Mhm.
side, and then sewed it on the bottom. And knowing that customer very well, I knew that she would never even notice that. So I didn't even say a word, and she was in love with the quilt, and it was all good. So,
It's always good when you know your clients, right?
yeah.
Yeah, I've had that as well, and that's exactly what I did. I think the customer had, I think her backing, she thought it was long enough. Um, yeah, but I've done that, and a lot of times it happens when the quilt top stretches way more than you anticipated. You think you're close, and then it's too short.
On my world, it always happens on my stuff because I'm like, oh, that'll work. Don't even measure it, but it won't work. Ava, you want to add anything?
Well, that brings back bad memories because I did do that one time and it was absolutely my fault. I was not paying attention. I was rushing, wanted to get it done, and come to the last pass and realized I was out of backing. And unfortunately, it was directional. So I print for the backing, so I could not do what you all did. So I had to call up and tell her what happened, hoping that I could add a piece of fabric and she wouldn't care. Unfortunately, that was not the
Oh
case.
no.
So I literally had to take it off and rip the entire quilting out.
Mm.
So I tried to be more careful from now on.
That kind of stuff does seem to only happen once because then you're double and triple checking that one thing
Yeah.
Yep.
until
But
some other new thing happens that you need to double and triple check.
We're
but
gonna get there.
a good lesson too is though, if you have clients that you've had for many, many years and you never had any issues, they always give you so much extra backing and you become careless. You trust that they always have done the right thing, and then that one time they did not. They had a brain fart just like we can have at times, and that happened to me also. But there, I could add on to the bottom.
Jean, you want to add anything?
Now, I had heard horror stories about this prior to when I started being a long armor. I had heard this from somebody that had a quilt done by a different long armor and had that issue. And so I've always been kind of paranoid about it because I heard that horror story. So if I measure it and I think it's too tight, because I have also had backings given to me that only have, 1 inch
Oh.
extra all the way around. And that makes me a little nervous. I will baste on a piece of muslin onto the top and onto the bottom, just to make sure that I don't ever run into, and it doesn't matter because at the end they're going to cut that off anyway.
Yeah.
So if it's too tight, if it's tight like that, I will tell them I'm going to put this on here just to make sure that I have enough. So you'll cut it off. It won't be a big deal.
Yeah.
But yes, no, I haven't had it actually happen to me, but I have been paranoid about it ever since.
It only takes that one story.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going for number 4. You notice an obvious piecing mistake that is fixable with a little effort. What would you do?
I'll take this one first. I had this exact thing on actually a couple of quilts now from the same person. She had a block and one of the corners that was supposed to come out from the center was obviously turned sideways. And I told her, I said, I can fix this. I don't mind quilt surgery. I definitely charged her for it, but she was so grateful because she never noticed it.
Yeah.
And luckily, it was before I loaded it.
Oh.
I did have one happen halfway through the quilting. I was following the pattern. It was a big diamonds, all sorts of things on it. And one of the sections didn't follow my quilting path and I couldn't figure out why. And I had to stand way back. And so I called her, talked to her. She took it back because it was fully basted. So I gave the quilt back to her. She did all the surgery and then brought it back to me. I had one of my own do the same thing and I didn't notice until partway through. So I did surgery on the frame because it was mostly quilted, lots of hand stitching, but it worked.
I have clients that do it a lot, and I just know now just fix it, add it to their bill. They're happy. But I did have one lady said, no, that's supposed to be wrong. And I'm like, oh, all right, then we will leave it wrong.
I only had that
I didn't.
once and I didn't know it was a super busy quilt, so I didn't really lay it out and look at it because I knew we were just doing edge to edge. And so, yeah, I quilted the whole thing and didn't notice it until I hung it over the thing to take a picture. So, I mean, that I just gave it back. I mean,
Well, she
I
didn't
told her
notice.
though, if she wanted to rip it out, I'd re-quilt that little area, but
Yeah.
and she didn't.
I had not that the piecing was necessarily wrong, but there was a hole in one of the squares,
Oh.
just a full-on hole in the fabric right in the middle of that particular square of fabric. And so I just called her because there was no way for me to fix it without having more fabric because I didn't make, anyway, I called her and asked her if she had a little scrap. I told her that there was a hole there and it needed fixed. She didn't want to have a hole right in the middle. Um, and then I did do surgery, but it was just one little square and it came out easy and popped in a new one and charged her
Yes. And
accordingly.
because our time is valuable.
Yes.
All right. Ava, pick a number. Try that in English. Ava, pick
One.
another number. One.
One.
You've been quilting the top. While moving the machine head, your foot gets caught on your basted edge and you rip a small pieced half square triangle. It is beyond repair. How do you proceed?
Would have never happened.
That happened to me.
Well, so in other words, the piece is damaged, is what you're saying?
Yeah.
I've had that happen
Mhm.
when I broke a needle. The machine, it was just ugly, and there was a hole. And again, I think when you have any of those instances, communication is the key because you're totally in a panic, number one, because it's their quilt, right? You screwed it up, accident or not. And I kind of always feel better if I get it out and tell them this is what happens. Where do we go from here? And the hole that in my instance was very small. And of course, um, I have this stuff that it's like little granules.
Bone ash.
There you go. Thank you. Not
Yeah.
working. And because the hole was small, I mean, you could see it slightly because what happens is when you then iron over it to fuse those granules to the fabric, it has a little bit of a sheen to it. But I had explained what I was gonna do, and she was okay with it.
Mhm.
So that's how I fixed it in my case.
I had one like that, but I didn't do it. It came to me that way.
Oh. Mhm.
And so, of course, you call, do you have the stuff? Do you want to make another one? Do you want to send it? She didn't want to do any of that. Oh, it's just for the grandkids. So she didn't want to do anything. And I'm like, well, I mean, it's just going to fray. So I cut a tiny little square of fusible interfacing and slid it in there and just pressed it so that at least it
At least it pulled.
shouldn't,
Mhm.
there's something there.
I had that happen. I don't do this anymore. I had put a pin where I needed to remember to fill in a piece of quilting that I had missed. And as I'm pulling the machine to the side, it snagged the pin, ripped the fabric. So I contacted her. Luckily, it was a friend of mine and she had some extra fabric. So it was a little diamond. So I just cut a little piece, hand applicate it right over the top. You couldn't even tell, blended right in, but that was terrifying.
Yeah.
So now I mark places I have to go fix with chalk.
That's what I did. I totally sure. I mean, it's almost like your brain's not sparking. That's the best word I can say. Because I'm pulling the machine and I feel the resistance. I'm like, what's going on? And I pulled real hard and it just ripped that whole triangle right. I'm like, so I called her and I'm like, do you have any more of this? She's like, no, that was down to the last like half inch. I'm like, okay. I said, these are all the whites I have. Which one would you like? And now that it's done, you can't even tell which, I mean, you'd have to really look, but it blends in pretty good. So, always trust your brain. If there's resistance, stop.
Like
All
when
right,
they put
Jeannie,
the buttons on.
buttons.
Oh,
Wait till after your quilt's quilted for embellishments.
I had one do that. So the first row of her quilt had all the embellishments, and then she realized probably shouldn't have done that. So the rest of it didn't have any. Thank
Mhm.
goodness.
Yeah. Jeannie, pick a number.
We didn't choose 10 yet, did we?
We only have 8.
Oh, sorry.
7.
They
7
said
or
10.
what?
I think all that's left is
So-
7, right?
6, 7, or 8.
7 it is.
7 and 6 would kind of just covered because that was a shattered needle. We'll cross that off. So 7, you're quilting along and find a pin that has been pieced into the quilt top. What would you do?
It's
Smash it.
underneath. It's
It-
underneath.
It's in the seam, enclosed in the quilt top. You only know
I've had that.
I don't know.
Mhm.
Me
I
too.
And it was a
I would,
plastic head.
Yep.
So I
One of
yeah.
those
smashed
big-
it with a hammer
Yeah.
and that broke all up. And then I could pull
Pull it out.
the pin part was left and I pulled that out
Mine
because
was
I had
Yeah.
already quilted it
Yeah.
even.
Oh,
It was when
that's
I
even
pulled
worse.
it off and something poked me is how I knew. And I was like, what the heck?
Oh,
No,
yeah.
mine was
If
a
it
big
was,
flower head. You could get the pin out, but then the flower head was stuck, so I had to rip seam anyway to get it out. Mhm.
That's what I
that's what
had.
I was,
I actually had the machine go through the little flat flower head, and that's how
Mhm.
I knew it was there. It's like, what? That's not supposed to sound like that.
oh, yeah. I haven't had that happen, so I don't know. But my first thought was I would have to rip out a little seam there. If I hadn't quilted it already, I'd have to rip out a little of the seam so I could get it pulled out.
Yeah, she's a repeat offender. We go over her quilt tops with magnets now.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
I was gonna say pretend I didn't notice. No, I'm just kidding. It has happened. It has happened to me, and where it was fairly easy. I just literally had to open one seam in order to get it out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess like Jody said, it depends what kind of pin it is too,
Mhm.
as to,
Yeah, a little glass set, I would just shatter it too and then pull that out. Mhm.
yeah.
Oh, that was
I made
pretty
a
fun.
coat one time. I
Go.
made a coat one time and I wore that thing for, oh man, pretty long. Until one day, I forget what I was doing, and I bent over and I'm like, what was that? There had been a pin in there for probably a year. I was wearing this coat, and it took that long to realize the pin was in there.
Mm-hmm.
I just left it in because I didn't wear it anymore.
Well, it's magical now.
Yeah.
So, I think that's fun. I don't want to say I like talking horror stories, but I think we all learn from each other's horror stories. So if you guys want to hear us discuss awful horror story, go ahead and put it in the comments on the video and we'd be glad to talk about it later. So, thanks for joining us. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.